guys, and welcome to another special edition of the Pagnotta Take on Sports. We continue with our college football previews for the 2015-2016 college football season. We started with, of course, the ACC. We've gotten through the American and the Big 12. We did complete as well, but now we move on, and this week we're going to focus on the Big 10. That's where I'm going to focus for this week. We'll start out, of course, this first show. I'm going to do the Big 10 East. Then I'll do the Big 10 West in a second show. That's how I'm going to try to break it down. And as I've been going, we're going to start at the bottom of the Big 10 East. I'll jump right into it here. And I'm going to start finishing 7th, I think, in the Big 10 East this year will be the Indiana Hoosiers, a team that really, when you look at it, has not had the success I think people thought. When they brought in Kevin Wilson, I think people thought that maybe Indiana was going in the right direction. At the time, they were a team that was average, wasn't great, and was really pretty close to getting into some of these bowl games, but have just been missing out. And they did it last year. They went 5-6. I had a really great start and just fell off towards the end of the year. They couldn't win just one more game against losing to teams like Maryland at home and also Penn State, who was a little bit down. But there's a chance they could be good this year. It really just depends really on that offense. I mean, you look at it, have to be a lot better than last year, ranking 120th in passing offense. They definitely have to improve there. Their rushing offense was pretty good, but they've lost easily one of their best running backs that they've had there in a long time in Tevin Coleman. He was sensational. So now they have to try to fill that spot. That's either going to be filled by probably Jordan Howard or some of the other guys who could end up factoring in. Could be guys like Tommy Mister, who could also be a factor after returning from knee surgery. Passing-wise, they have to find some guys that they can rely on in the passing game. Nate Sudfeld does return at quarterback. That's a positive, but he was coming off an injury. Not a guy, a guy that's really been battling for his job ever since he got to Bloomington. So, not really a big-time leader, but they're hoping he can step up and play well. In wide receiver, they are severely unproven. That's going to be really battled for by guys like Jay Sean Harris, Sammy Cobbs, Ricky Jones, a guy in Dominic Booth who was a starter last year, not even expected to start this year. Marquis Hawkins, and even Damon Graham can end up factoring in there. And, the best part of this entire offense is the offensive line, where they returned 3 starters. So they got something going there. And if they can find a running back, I think they may be able to run the ball enough, be effective. I mean, I have them winning 5 games. I don't think they'll lose a game at a conference because their out-of-conference schedule is pretty weak. To be honest with you, I mean, I know they go to Wake Forest, but I think they'll win that football game. I think this team is talented. There's definitely talent here on that offensive side. On the defensive side, you look, they returned 3 starters up front. There's another guy who played there last year, enough where he was considered a starter as a backup, and that's Adarius Rayner. He'll be backing up both defensive tackles, Nate Hoff and Darius Latham, who played pretty well last year. Nick Mangieri will be there as well. Linebacker, they do return one of their better linebackers, T.J. Simmons, so that's something to keep an eye on. But the rest of the guys in that linebacking core are all going to be new. So they're going to have to try to find people that can step up into these roles. So, they do run a 3-4 defense. So, they losing on those linebackers is definitely going to hurt. You look at corner, again, there's no one there that returns from last year. That's going to be a battle all the way. And I mean, their secondary wasn't great last year. And both of their starting corners are gone. The only guy they have back is their safety, Antonio Allen. So, there's a lot of flux going on here in Bloomington. I think, the storyline going in for Indiana has to be that Kevin Wilson's on the hot seat. If he doesn't get it done this year, there's going to be a lot of pressure to try to fire him, find someone else, a guy that has, proved it in some of these lower conferences. And if they can do that, I mean, they should. I mean, Kevin Wilson, you look at his career, record. he's only 14-34. They've got to find something better than that. And if he doesn't have a winning season, I think they're going to be in trouble. Like I said, I got to go in 5-7, 1-7 in conference. Their only conference win I think will be at Purdue, because I don't think Purdue's going to be worth anything really this year. I mean, they lose out in a tiebreaker to Rutgers, so I don't think they're going to get what they want. And I think ultimately at the end of the season, Kevin Wilson will be out of a job. But you just really never know. Indiana could end up winning another game or two and sneak up in there and get into a bowl game. But as for them competing in the Big Ten East, I don't think they stand any chance. They're going to probably be somewhere near the bottom. From there, we move on. As I mentioned, the team they lose out in the tiebreaker to Rutgers, who actually didn't have a horrible year last year. Rutgers actually played some pretty good football. Kyle Flood's actually got this team playing pretty decent. I mean, they won 8 games last year, including beating my Tar Heels pretty solidly in the bowl game. I mean, the final score was only a 19-point game, but they really destroyed us in that bowl game. I mean, they returned some really good players, and there's a chance that they could be pretty good. It's just things have to work out, in a Big Ten that's actually really tough, and they play in the tougher side of the Big Ten. But looking at it, quarterback-wise, they are going to have to find a new starter there, which, with Gary Nova having left. So now they have to turn to either Chris Laviano, who's been there for a while, or Hayden Redding, a former recruit by LSU who ended up transferring there. So that's a pretty good bring-in. He was a good quarterback, just got shuffled to the back there at LSU. I don't know how he did. But he's going to get a chance here for Rutgers, and I think they're definitely going to have to take advantage of having him in there. Now, as for the running back position, they are seeing some pretty good promise in Paul James, but they got a whole bunch of them. Paul James, their leading rusher from last year, Desmond Peoples will also be back. As well as Justin Goodwin, Josh Hicks, and Robert Martin. All these guys could factor into the run game. So they've got a whole bunch that they can put in there, but Paul James is expected to be the main guy to go. As for wide receiver, they do have one of the better ones, not only in the Big Ten, but maybe in the country. This guy is an extreme talent. He had 55 catches, 1,086 yards last year, 10 touchdowns. Slavonte Carew, a senior. He came back for his senior season. Most people thought he would end up leaving, so he's a big bring back for them to try to ease the quarterback transition. I think he's going to be a huge key. But besides him, not a whole lot of guys that are proven, but some guys that may be able to step up. Andre Patton, Jamarion Grant, and John Simmons are just some of the guys that could end up having to step up and may end up stepping up. On the offensive line, they only returned 2 starters. So that's something to keep an eye on right there. So hopefully some of those guys can slide in there and help that running game, which is pretty much loaded in the backfield. The only issue there with having all those guys is they're going to end up having to find someone eventually. They can't just sit there and keep shuffling back and forth between these different running backs. They're going to have to find someone instead of having that committee type feel to it. As for the defense, on the defensive line, they do return a strong defensive tackle in Darius Hamilton. He's a pretty great player. He was the heart and soul of that team last year, but they're going to need to be a lot better. They were 106th nationally, 13th in the Big Ten in rushing defense. They definitely have to improve that, but he's their leader up front. He's the guy that's going to help to engineer that, as well as Jawane Mira, but besides that, really extremely young behind that. They're going to have to find another defensive end. Nose tackle is an area they've got to find someone to step up. So there are some question marks there. At the linebacking position, Steve Longa is probably the best returner, as well as Quentin Goss. Neither one of them are really superstars, though. At middle linebacker, they do get a junior college transfer in Kawan Lewis, who will be plugged in and should be playing almost immediately. Again, behind them, a lot of youth, no real game experience. So again, defensively, they are extremely thin. Corner, they don't really have anyone great returning. But according to Kyle Flood, and to their defensive captain, Darius Hamilton, they believe that this secondary is extremely talented. There's guys that need to step up, but they believe that they can step up. Anthony Siofi is one of them at the cornerback position, as well as Nadir Barnwell will have to step up. At safety, they do return DeLon Stevenson, so he's a guy to definitely keep an eye on, and Davon Jacobs should slide into the other safety position. So, I mean, when you look at it, another key aspect to their game was the kicking. Kyle Federico was pretty good last year, so that's one area they're going to have to definitely use because they maybe end up kicking. They may end up kicking a lot of field goals. Now, when you look at it, I think the key for Rutgers is they definitely have to get a lot better defensively. But the problem for them is they don't really return a whole lot of depth. They only return 5 starters. Darius Hamilton's the best out of all of them. The other guys are there, but they're not really extremely proven. So these guys have to start stepping up in order for them to be competitive. I mean, they won 8 games last year. They were 3-5 in the conference, but they're not going to expect to be that much better this year if the defense doesn't step up. Because now with the quarterback change coming, that defense is what's going to have to keep them in games early on until that offense can maybe come along and start to try to take over and have some sort of impact. I think if they can decide on a quarterback, if they can decide really on their top running back, you can rotate a couple of guys, but you can't be rotating 5 or 6 guys. If they can get one of them to really take that leadership role, Carew can have another good year, and that defense can step up. You just really never know where Rutgers could go and how good they could be. I don't think anyone expected them to win 8 games last year, so they're definitely a team that you have to keep an eye on. Maybe going forward to make a run, but I think they go 5-7, 1-7 in conference, and I think Kyle Flood, he's got something working there, but if he ends up working out with one of these guys, getting one of these guys in there, and they end up working out, they're both sophomores, so you never know what can happen down the line. That's a team you're going to have to look to the future for. We move up to 5th now, just a little bit better in conference, Maryland. Really, when you look at Maryland, the transition from the ACC hasn't been as bad as I think people thought it was going to be. I think people thought it was going to be a disastrous move. They went 7-6, 4-4 in conference, so they're not that bad. I mean, they made a push in that conference. Now, the problem has always been for Maryland is staying healthy. They really have never had luck with staying healthy at all. Now, this time, they do lose Stephon Diggs. That's a huge, huge loss for them. So now, replacing him is definitely not going to be easy. But, when you look at it, quarterback, they do return Caleb Rowe, who was there last year. It seems like he's going to be the starter. I don't think there's any doubt in anyone's mind that he's going to be out there. So Caleb Rowe should be the guy there. Running back, you got 2 talented running backs in Brandon Ross and Wes Brown who can feature in to that running game. So they're definitely 2 guys to keep an eye on. But Ross has to be better. Last year he only had 85 carries for 419 yards and 4 touchdowns. And if they can really prove themselves, I think they can make that a potent rushing attack on the ground, which was what they were brought in as. They were brought in highly recruited, and they need to show why they were brought in highly recruited. Wide receiver, Marcus Leaks, the best guy returning. He is, I believe he's the brother, I'm pretty sure he's the brother of Chris Leak, the former Florida quarterback, and he's expected to take on a bigger role this year, as well as Laverne Jacobs, and as well as Jawan Winfrey, Ama Eta Tawo, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but he's also expected to get some time there at wide receiver. They have some talented wide receivers, and when you look at it, you got to think that they could perform well. There's talent there, but last year the leading receiver was the running back Wes Brown, or he's the leading returning receiver. So these guys definitely have to step up with Diggs being gone. That's a huge loss. They got to be able to fill that void, and it doesn't just have to be one guy. It can be multiple guys, but they got to be able to somehow try to fill in that production. Offensive line, they returned 3 starters, but one of them is not expected to start due to Damian Prince, the highly recruited guy from last year that they ended up getting. He's going to slide in there. to take over that spot. Andrew Zeller returns, though, and so does Ryan Doyle. So they do have some solid pieces in place, but again, the rest of those guys have to be replaced. There right now, I see 3 freshmen that are projected to be starters on that offensive line. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on right there. They are extremely young on that offensive line, and they're going to have to get more experience there before you can really see them being an effective team. On defense, again, they only return 4 starters here. The secondary is the strength of this team. William Likely at the cornerback position, he is one of the better ones in the Big Ten. He's a really good player. 6 interceptions last year. He's a shutdown corner. Opposite him is Sean Davis, who's a solid returner as well, so you can't really go against either one of them. You really don't want to challenge either one of them. When you look at it, at the safety position, they also return Anthony Nixon. So they have 3 starters in there that do return. Other, A.J. Hardy is expected to be the other safety. So there's talent here. There's definitely talent here. But when you look at the numbers again, their passing defense was still 13th in the Big 12, in the Big 10. And 78th in the nation last year. They got to be a lot better than that. That's the strength of their defense this year, so that's definitely got to improve. Up front, they only return 1 starter from last year, but it's a man that had 6 sacks, and Yannick Nagaku. Again, these names, just tried. Some of them I'll be trying to guess here. But he returns with 6 sacks, so he's a guy that could end up being pretty big. But other than that, there are no returning starters, so it's going to be hard to see this team really getting pressure on the pass. They got to find someone that can do that to help out that back end right there, because those numbers are a little bit flawed in the passing game. It's not all in the secondary. You got to have a pass rush in there, and they're going to have to find someone besides Nagaku to get in there. At linebacker, they don't return any starters here as well. Their best player here is Abner Logan. He's the most experienced. Guys like Jermaine Carter Jr. and Jalen Brooks, both sophomores, will see playing time at the other positions, as well as maybe Brock Dean. Kayvon Walker could slide in there, and Avery Thompson. Those are experienced guys, but they're juniors listed behind sophomores. So guys that haven't stepped up and proven themselves. So when you look at this Maryland team, similar to a lot of these teams at the bottom of the Big Ten, they don't return a whole lot, especially defensively. But when you look at Maryland, I think Randy Edsall, 4 years he's been there. He's had some decent teams. He's had some teams that have been bad, but a lot of it has been injuries. I know, we watched him play in the ACC. I remember a year against us. I believe it was on the road. We were there, and they had to start their linebacker at quarterback. So they've always been plagued through injuries. Now I think the thing is you're replacing guys that had set school records with guys like Stephon Diggs. So, when you look at it, they're supposed to be more pass-friendly this year. But really, the experience is at the running back position. Those guys that are out there at wide receiver, they must step up. They must make that offense more potent. But when you look at it last year, their offensive numbers were terrible. Total offense, they were 109th in the country. Scoring offense, 65th. So they've got to be a lot better there. Really, when you look at it, I don't see how they won 7 games last year. This year, I only have them winning 5 games. 2 games in conference. It's just really hard to see this team being really great with all that they lost. But you never know with Randy Edsall. He might just pull it out. I think they could be that team that's on the line to make a bowl game, but I don't think they're going to be a team that's going to get in there and make a whole lot of noise and really shock anyone. But they're a team to keep an eye on for the future, definitely, especially with a young defense. And if they keep giving Randy Edsall the time. From there, we move on. Number 4 in the Big Ten East. This is usually one of the powerhouses, but keep in mind, they are going to be 4th this year. They are building towards something. I'm talking about Michigan. Bring in one of the best hires I think I've seen in college football in a very long time in Jim Harbaugh. Absolutely love the hire. He's from Michigan. He coached in college before. Was very successful. He coached in the NFL, led his team to a Super Bowl, got forced out. The man's one of the best coaches I think in either part of the sport right now, both the NFL or college. he just knows how to coach. I love the way he coaches. He's definitely he is not inheriting a program that is at the top of its game right now. His recruiting class that he just brought in, I believe, only had, I think it was 14 recruits, if that. He had to put together a late recruiting class. Now, the big thing for me about this recruiting class with him is he did steal one of the bigger prospects away, Zach Gentry, a quarterback from Texas. I think that was one of the biggest things he did to start coming in there, because he got a late start in recruiting, but he went in there, took this guy away, now has him there. I can't wait to see what he's able to do. When I look at it, at the quarterback position, now Gentry won't factor in here. It's really going to come down to really Jake Rudock and Shane Morris at this position. But this is a battle that's going to be that may be going on well into the season. We just really don't know. Shane Morris, of course, he's known more for his incident last year where he was hit on the field, was falling down, and Brady Hoke didn't take him out. He was a highly touted recruit, but just has never worked out. I mean, look at his passing stats from last year. He was 14 of 40 for 128 yards, 0 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. In his entire career, he has not thrown a touchdown. And, I mean, he's had enough playing time to where he should have thrown a touchdown for sure. But they bring in Rudock, who was a transfer from Iowa. He left, and he goes to an in the conference team, which I thought was interesting, and I think that also says something to Jim Harbaugh's recruiting ability to be able to bring him in. But he gets a late start. He's going to have to learn that playbook very late. He just came in fall camp, but it just depends on how fast he picks it up as to whether or not he's going to be the guy that can lead that team. And I think if not, you've got to move quickly if you're Jim Harbaugh to the next guy. I don't think either of these guys are really Jim Harbaugh's quarterback. I think that's going to be Gentry or Alex Malzone, who also came in this recruiting class. Those will be his quarterbacks. So he's going to have to wait just a little bit there. At running back, he gets a good guy that transferred over from USC. Ty Isaac, a former recruit there. He came out of Juliet High School in Illinois. This guy was great. I remember watching him when he was in high school. I watched him on some of the Friday night telecasts they used to have on ESPNU, and this guy can really run the football. They just never really gave him a chance in that loaded backfield they had at USC. I mean, we've all known they're loaded. So he's coming in there to Michigan. I think he has a chance to be an All-Big Ten player. I actually have him in my All-Big Ten list, because from seeing him, his tape, watching how he runs, I think he got pushed out of USC because they had brought in too much talent almost at that position. And I think he's going to fit in well here. I think Jim Harbaugh will like him. He fits this style of running well because he is a thicker guy. He's big, but he also has the speed. So he's going to fit that offense well. As well as Derek Green, they've got him as well. That's going to factor into the run game. He's been there a couple of years, but a guy that was recruited highly by the rest of the nation, hasn't really worked out. Now, wide receiver, trying to get help for these quarterbacks. Only one starter returns. That's Amara Darbreau. The rest of this wide receiving core is relatively unproven. Darbreau's going to have to really show up. He had 36 catches, 473 yards, and 2 touchdowns last year. And with Funchess having moved on to the NFL, it's crucial they find someone else here. J.U. Chisan will be trying to get his shot in there. Freddie Canteen as well. And Maurice Ways is also going to try to get his name in there. Don't be shocked if true freshman Brian Cole maybe works his way in there. He was a talented player. He was their best recruit. So he's a guy to definitely keep an eye on there. And I really don't think that they're really worried about trying to force him into action too early. Their biggest strength in the receiving core is the tight end position. Jake Butt, the tight end, he could definitely be a guy to keep an eye on for all conference, as well as A.J. Williams if they can live up to their expectations. The strength of this offense is on the offensive line. They have great starters to return. Mason Cole, who was a starter as a freshman last year, it might be the strength of this offensive line is a sophomore. Kyle Kalis also returns at guard. The left guard position, Ben Braden returns. In center, they also get back Graham Glasgow. Right tackle, they're in decent shape also as Eric Magnuson slides in there. He's expected to play pretty well. So the offensive line looks like they're going to be able to protect for whichever quarterback's back there, open up some running lanes for either Isaac or Green, whoever ends up getting these carries. And I think if they just find a way to put it all together, they may just be, they can make a run offensively for sure. I mean, you look at it, if they can get things working the way that Jim Harbaugh wants it. His offense isn't really that complicated. It's not a whole lot different from what we were seeing previously. It's really the same offense. So, if he can get the right people in there, I think that Jim Harbaugh could really show people that, he's going to make this team good really quick. I think they're an offense to watch out for, and they got to be a lot better than last year. I mean, 112th in the country is not where they need to be. Now, defensively, again, they're usually always a great defense, and they do end up they show on paper that they're going to be a good defense again this year. They really just have to show, when they're on the field that they're going to be a good defense. Up front is the only area I think you really have to maybe take a look at and possibly question under new defensive coordinator DJ Durkin, who ends up coming in there. When you look at it, Chris Wormley, he's the only real returner at the defensive end position. The other defensive end position, they're going to have to try to find someone there. It's going to be Mario Ojemudia, I think is how you pronounce his name, or Lawrence Marshall. Both of those guys, Ojemudia, I think he's a senior. Marshall is a younger player, so you don't know who's going to end up sliding in there. They are switching. They're going to run multiple sets this year, but the team is mostly shown 4-3, so that's something to definitely keep an eye on as well. But up front, they'll have Brian Monet, who is a sophomore, who's going to actually slide in there. Man, it's going to end up taking the starting job away from Ryan Glasgow, a safety, a starter from last year. Will Henry and Maurice Hurst will be battling for the other defensive tackle position. Now, at the linebacker, here's where this team really has their strengths. Two returning starters in James Ross and Joe Bolden. Both of those guys are very solid linebackers. Both of them have a chance to be all Big Ten. But the biggest one is actually the return of Desmond Morgan. He is going to be back in the lineup this year, and they're going to need him after having to replace guys like Jake Ryan and Brendan Baer. Baer, who played more of a hybrid linebacker / defensive end. So, Morgan will help ease that. Behind them, there is some depth as well, so that's something to definitely keep an eye on. The secondary is actually the strength of this entire group by far. You got Jordan Lewis, who returns. He led the team with 2 interceptions last year. Not a great stat, but he's definitely a good coverage corner to keep an eye on. They get the transfer from Stanford to come in there, Wayne Lyons, who was recruited by Jim Harbaugh and now has moved to Michigan. They get him in there. He's actually going to unseat Blake Countess, who was a starter last year, who will probably play more slot corner if they need him to. Countess is pretty skilled as well. And now you get Lyons in there. So they're really getting some good guys in here. Strong safety. They've moved Jabril Peppers from corner. He was originally supposed to play corner when he was brought in as a recruit. He's one of the more talented guys. He's definitely got to keep an eye on to have a breakout season. And then you also have Gerard Wilson. He's a returning starter as a senior. He's one of the better ones in the Big Ten. So this defense is extremely talented. And if this offense can come along at a decent pace, you really look at this team and say they could be that team that could get in there and shock everyone in Jim Harbaugh's first year. I think Jim Harbaugh is a great coach, and we saw what he did with San Francisco, a team that wasn't extremely talented, but he turned them into a competitor, and he made them a good team, even with Alex Smith, who was struggling once he came in there, flip of a switch, and they were right up near the top. But, when I look at this, it's a little bit of a different situation. There's a lot more pressure here, and I think, look, year one, I have them going 7-5. I think people have to be satisfied going 7-5, 4-4 in conference. I know it's going to be tough to see them lose games, but this part of the conference is the toughest part of the conference. This team, especially offensively, is just not built yet to go up there and be competitive. Give Harbaugh a year or two at least to get a recruiting class in there. You give him 3 or 4 years, they're winning championships, at least the Big Ten championship, because he's going to get what he wants in there. And if this is where he's planning on staying, then he's going to be in a good boat within a couple of years. But this is not a job where he walks in there and they're going to win 11 or 12 games year one, be in a playoff and be competing, unless they have just some sort of Cinderella run here. But, you know, they're definitely a team to keep an eye on. They're probably going to be a team that will be on TV, you know, almost every week. They're going to have that interest factor, and they might end up pulling some upsets and really shocking everyone. From there, we move up. Number 3 in the Big Ten East is Penn State. Penn State, it's been a while. It's been a while since people have really talked about Penn State being an extreme competitor. And you got to look at this team and say, well, they only won 2 games in conference last year. How do you think they're going to be a team that's going to be up there in the battle for the Big Ten East? Well, I think last year that a lot of young guys, especially offensively, they do return a good amount of this team. So that's something to keep an eye on right there. Of course, on offense, they do return 8 starters. The most key one of them, of course, is quarterback Christian Hackenberg. Now, he is highly talked about. Of course, he's got all the draft hype around him. And I think this kid's good. I think he's a little bit overhyped. I mean, when you look at him, his mistakes are part of his problem. I mean, he threw more interceptions than he threw touchdowns last year. That's definitely something that has to be fixed if he's going to be one of those top quarterbacks drafted, like people are saying, or if he could make an outside run at a Heisman. I think he will. I think he's got a better offensive line. He's got a more experienced offensive line. And I think all they have to do really is, you know, they definitely have to find a running game, just something to help them out, because last year they ranked 117th in rushing yards, 110th in scoring offense. That's something that has to get a whole lot better if they plan to be competitive in the Big Ten East. But I think they definitely have the pieces in place. Running back, they do bring back Akeel Lynch, who was their leading rusher last year. He had 678 yards on 147 attempts and 4 touchdowns. He's easily going to be the starter. There's no doubt about that. And there's a group of freshmen coming in, guys like Saquon Barkley and Andre Robinson, just to name 2 of them. There are guys behind him as well that could come in there and make an early impact on this team. At wide receiver, you know, they do return both their starters here, but there's guys that could end up de-seating them. Deshaun Hamilton is definitely going to be one of the starters, a guy who returns from last year, 82 catches, 899 yards, but only 2 touchdowns. He's definitely got to improve in the red zone. They got to improve that red zone efficiency if they want to really be competitive at all. But he's got to step up more down near the red zone. He's got the talent to do so. Geno Lewis is a guy. He won't be, right now he's not projected to start, but he is a returning starter. He was talented. We saw glimpses of him maybe becoming that number 1 receiver, but he's been de-seated by Chris Godwin, who's really apparently shown something over the offseason. And they showed a little bit last year as well. And Saeed Blacknall, both of those guys were recruits last year, highly touted recruits, so they'll come in there. They're going to try to make their impact on this team and get in the rotation. Most talented pass catcher, I think, this year is Kyle Carter, the tight end. He's definitely a talent. He returns from last year, and that's always an area where Penn State, if they have a good tight end, that definitely helps. I mean, Hackenberg needs someone that can catch the ball, and he finally gets an offensive line that is somewhat experienced, that's been through it. He returns 4 starters on the offensive line, including both offensive guards. Brian Gia returns, as well as Brandon Mohan. Angelo Mangiero returns at center, and Andrew Nelson returns at right tackle. Now, some of these guys are young. 2 of them are sophomores, and they do have to find a new left tackle. That's going to be key, because they got to protect the blind side on Hackenberg. He's not a runner, so I mean, when you look at it offensively, there's some talent there. Hackenberg's got to be more efficient. He's got the weapons at wide receiver if everything's working out like they think it's going to work out. He's got a good enough running back in Akeel Lynch, and he's got some freshmen that can step in there if he needs them to. The offensive line has some more experience. I mean, this is his best chance. He needs this to go well because he's not coming back next year. If he's being rated as high as he is, which I don't really see it with his passing stats, but again, I mean, you just never really know. He's going to have to definitely see some improvement from himself and from the rest of that team if they want to make a run. Defensively, you look at them, they do return 7 starters. The most key, of course, is Anthony Zettel, the defensive tackle. They return both him and Austin Johnson at the defensive tackle position, so that's great. Zettel's the leader of that defense by far, and he led the team in tackles for loss with 17 a year ago, 8 sacks, so he's a guy to keep an eye on. He even led the team in interceptions with 3, so that's absolutely nuts. He's going to have to... I mean, he's easily the leader there, but other guys are going to have to step up. Both defensive ends need to be replaced. Garrett Sickles and Carl Nassib are the guys that are expected to slide in there and take over those spots. At linebacker, we all know Penn State is known for being a linebacker university. The best guy that they do end up having coming back is Naeem Wortman. So they're going to definitely have to look to him to be the leader after Mike Hull ended up leaving the Big Ten leader in tackles last year. So Wortman has to take over. Brandon Bell also returns right there, but replacing Hull on the outside is going to be tough. Either Jason Cambita or Troy Reeder will slide into that position. In the secondary, again, 3 starters do return here, so there is some strength here. Trevor Williams returns at the one corner. The other corner is undecided right now. It looks like... Grant Haley is the guy who's going to end up sliding in there in order to replace Jordan Lucas, who has moved to safety now. He'll be there as well as Marcus Allen, who played very well as a freshman. So they do end up returning some key pieces here. Now, part of the reason also with their offensive efficiency is they struggled. Their kicking game was awful last year. They're going to have to be a lot better. I mean, really, when you look at it, there's a lot of negatives with this Penn State team. But there's experience here now, finally, for the first time in a couple of years. It's really just been a disaster with all the fallout from the allegations and everything like that have been spread around. But now this team is building back up to, I think, where they want to be. I think James Franklin brings that type of energy that they want on the sideline. Because really, since Joe Paterno left, I know Bill O'Brien did a good job, but Bill O'Brien's goal was never to stay there. Bill O'Brien was looking for really the first train out of town, I think, to get out of there. He was just using that as a holdover job to try to get back into the NFL. I mean, I think Franklin's got what he wants. I think he's bringing in the guys that he wants. Now, some of those guys will definitely start to see time. When you look at it, there is enough talent there. And Hackenberg is a talented quarterback. He was recruited as the #1 quarterback in the country, so he's in his recruiting class. So he's not, there's something there. He's just got to be able to prove it. The defense, I think, is the strongest it's been in a little while. Their defense has really always been strong, but I think they're going to have another great year. I mean, they were second in the country in total defense. I think they're going to be right back up there again. And if this team can make a run, I have them going 9-3, 5-3 in conference. I think also part of it is because the rest of the Big Ten is down, but I think they're that team that could get up there. 9-3 isn't going to get them, anywhere close to a playoff appearance, but it'll get them to where people would like to expect them to be, and I think they can definitely be that good this year. Okay, now moving on. Of course, this is the way you want to close it. 1-2. We know who's going to be 1-2 in this conference, and it's going to come down to one game. It's going to come down to the game November 21st in Columbus, Ohio, between Ohio State and Michigan State. Since it's in Columbus, I'm favoring Ohio State, which is why I have Michigan State second. I'll talk about Michigan State first, and then, of course, I'll finish with Ohio State. When you look at Michigan State, one thing that I think you got to look at before you even talk about any of the people that do return or anything like that, D'Antonio lost his best assistant in Pat Narduzzi, now the head coach at Pittsburgh. is something that he, I think, is trying to pass off as not being as big as people want to think it is, but it's gonna be a tough loss. I know Narduzzi is not the guy out there playing, and they still have all this talent coming back, but losing a guy like that, I think he was the best. I actually think he was the best defensive coordinator in the country. It's going to be hard for them to try to really just pass that off as just an easy blow. But when you look at it, I mean, this is an offensive team, I think, for Michigan State that is maybe more talented than it's been in a while. I mean, they've lost some players, but look, when you look at their quarterback, I think he's one of the best in the country. He's an outside sleeper for the Heisman. Now, he's not the sexy pick for the Heisman because he doesn't run the ball around. He doesn't sit there. I mean, he won't sit there and sling the ball around the yard, for 600 yards a game. He's not, quarterback in the Big 12. That's not what he is. He's a guy, they run a specific style of offense. They want to be balanced. And, I mean, when you look at their offense, they were balanced. They were 11th in the country last year in total offense, 19th rushing offense, and 35th in passing offense. So when you look at it, they were balanced. And I think that's what they got to do again this year. Now, when Cook's easily the leader. They have to find a running back for sure with Jeremy Langford having moved on. Now you got to try to find someone to fill in there. Madre London is the guy that's expected to be the starter right now, but Gerald Holmes is a guy to keep an eye on, maybe to get in there. LJ Scott, a true freshman, definitely could see some carries. But I think, they have the talent there. They'll find someone. We never knew that Langford was going to be the guy. There was a huge group of running backs that were going out for that position when Langford was battling, and he stepped up and performed very well. I really trust how D'Antonio recruits. Wide receiver, they have to find someone to replace the departed Tony Lippett, who was the Big Ten Receiver of the Year last year. Guys that will try to fill in that void will be guys like Aaron Burbich, as well as Monty Madrius, A.J. Troop, and D'Anthony Arnett, the latter of the two who were brought in as recruits and have never seemed to work out. When you look at it, it's there. I think the best chance that they have is Burbich or R.J. Shelton. They're going to have to step up. He does return he has two tight ends that I think could definitely factor in as well, Josiah Price and Jamal Lyles. But when you look at it, the offensive line, one of the best in the Big Ten. I think they might actually be the best in the Big Ten. They are loaded. Jack Conklin at left tackle, one of the best in the country. Center Jack Allen anchors in the middle. You got Donovan Clark, another senior, and Cody Keeler returns at the other tackle position. Only have to replace one of the guard positions. Brian Allen or Benny McGowan will slide in there. So the strength is the offensive line. I think the key is they got to find a running back that they can hand that ball off to. There are going to be a lot of guys going out for it. But we don't know anything about Delton Williams. That was one of the guys who was suspended in the offseason, so most likely they are going without him. That's why they have to try to find one of these younger guys to step up. But when you look at it, I think the wide receiver position, they got to have someone that's more consistent with Lippett gone. They can't have just one guy doing it. He's got to have multiple targets that he can throw to, and it's going to show early on. I mean, it's got to start quickly. Western Michigan, it's at Western Michigan. That game cannot be one where they just walk in there and say, we're going to win this game easily. Western Michigan is a team that could be a sleeper. Not to upset them, but to definitely give them problems the week before they play Oregon. They're going to have to come ready for Oregon. I mean, I think they got to know that Oregon's going to put it all out there for them. But I think, when you look at the defense, again, that's the strength. We expect that to be the strength of this team. And even with the loss of Narduzzi, I think there's so much talent here that you just can't really pass it off. You look, of course, up front. Shalik Calhoun last year, he actually had a disappointing year. He had 8 sacks, and that was a disappointing year for him because people thought he was going to be the best defensive end in the country. And I think, there were a lot of double teams that were set on him. Attention got kind of taken away, from some of those other guys, and that's what helped them to open up. He still got 8 sacks, but he was definitely more focused on last year, he's going to have to get back to that Big Ten Defensive Lineman of the Year back in 2013 type status if he's going to lead that defense again this year. The other defensive end spot is locked down by another senior, Lawrence Thomas, who had a good year last year. He's expected to play well. And then Joel Heath is the starting defensive tackle in the middle. He had a good year last year. And also they have another senior in Damon Knox who's going to be able to rotate in there. But he's actually been pushed out of the way by a sophomore, guy who played great last year as a true freshman in Malik McDowell. He was a freshman All-American. He was a highly touted recruit. He's going to make a huge impact this year. Linebacker position, they only lose one guy in the middle. But that shouldn't be that hard to replace. Riley Bellew should slide in there without any problems. Darian Harris and Ed Davis have the outside linebacker positions, but I do believe there was an injury to Ed Davis. I don't remember how long he was out, but I think I remember seeing that. If he is, they're going to have to find a backup for him pretty quick. But if he's not, of course, they'll slide in there and have no problems with that. When you look at the secondary, they only return one starter that's expected to start in R.J. Williamson. Darian Hicks returns, but is expected to be pushed out of the way by Arjan Kokilakan, as well as Vontae Copeland, a redshirt freshman who is expected to start at the other corner position. So they're young at the corner position, but behind that, they do have Monte Nicholson, who's expected to be a starter, as well as Demetrius Cox will be a backup safety to definitely keep an eye on. So this team is talented, and the kicking game that they have is very good as well. So, I mean, when I look at this team all around, you would think this team's going to be pretty good again. I mean, I look at this defense, and I think, the front seven is an extreme strength. There is talent in the back seven, and I don't think D'Antoni is going to let this team slide. Now, the loss of Narduzzi, it really hurts. I mean, look, this team needed something. They didn't need something like that to happen. Especially being a team that was up there, being competitive. But I think when you look at their schedule, again, their two hardest games are the two games they lost last year. It's Oregon, but they get them at home, and it's Ohio State. I don't think they beat Ohio State. It's in Ohio State. I'm pretty sure Ohio State's going to have a quarterback by then. I would really hope they have a quarterback by then. But, look, Connor Cook is really that good. If his receivers can step up, if they can find a running back, the offensive line is that good. The defense is one of the best in the country. It doesn't matter that Narduzzi left. They're still going to be one of the best. I mean, it's a blow, but they're still going to be one of the best because of the talent that's there. I think this team knows that they're good, and I think they're going to show that they're good this year. They go 7-1 in conference. They go 11-1, and they're going to be a team to keep an eye on that playoff picture. I'm going to go through my national predictions here after I finish all these conferences. But, yeah, I think they're a team you got to definitely keep an eye on, and I think D'Antonio's team will be up there. They got a chance to prove it. If they beat Oregon, they're going to be right there, and I think if they beat Oregon, the rest of their schedule is smooth enough where they can get through it, and I think it will come down to that game on the 21st of November in Columbus. Now the team that I expect to win that game, it's the team that everyone's picking to win the national championship again. Go back-to-back. When you look at it, I mean, look, they didn't start off the way they wanted to with this offseason. With losing Joey Bosa to suspension, they lost a couple other guys as well, guys like Dontre Wilson. I believe they lost Jalen Marshall as well for that game, and I believe there was one other player that they did lose for that game. But the big one that you got to keep an eye on is losing Bosa, one of the best pass rushers in the country. They're going to lose them for the first game of the year at Virginia Tech, but Virginia Tech suffered a huge blow as well, losing their starting running back, Shy McKenzie, for the entire season. So when you look at it, again, the first thing people turn to at Ohio State this offseason is, of course, the quarterback battle. There are three guys that were in the quarterback race. One of them has dropped out now. Of course, Braxton Miller has moved out to wide receiver. They're already expecting he's going to be the best wide receiver on that team. I don't think that's true by any stretch of the imagination. But we'll talk about that when we get to the wide receivers. But when you look at the quarterback battle, it's Cardale Jones, it's J.T. Barrett. The better of the quarterbacks is J.T. Barrett. Cardale Jones is good. Cardale Jones success, though, was masked by the success of Ezekiel Elliott. I mean, look, Cardale Jones is a big guy. He's physical at the quarterback position. He's got the arm strength. But J.T. Barrett is the better overall quarterback because Cardale Jones, I just can't see Cardale Jones standing back there and beating teams with his talent, with his arm. He doesn't have the running ability that J.T. Barrett does. Barrett is a speedster. He runs the read option very well. Jones is just thicker. And I think, you know, people will be able to figure out how to stop Jones, whereas Barrett, he showed that Heisman mentality, the way that he played. And again, I just, you know, I think basically how I would look at it is if Ezekiel Elliott went down, who would be better situated? I think it would be Barrett. What I think really puts it over the top is the fact that J.T. Barrett was in the Heisman race. He was actually supposed to be invited to New York, and he was in a walking boot when he was invited to New York. He got injured and was in a walking boot at New York, you know, in New York, and he still had a shot to win the Heisman. That's how good he played. I mean, you look at his numbers. He threw 34 touchdowns. He had 10 interceptions last year. Only 10. That's pretty good. He threw for nearly 3,000 yards, and that's with the rushing ability. Cardale Jones, again, when you look at the stats, again, just a little bit flawed by the running game. Now, getting away from the quarterback battle, as I've said, if you want to know my take, it's going to be Barrett. He should be the starter. I think he is going to be the starter week 1. Ezekiel Elliott at the running back position is a monster. He's the best running back in the country. He's their Heisman Trophy pick. It's not going to be one of the quarterbacks because there's just so much going on at that position. I don't think either one of them will get into the Heisman race. Elliott is the hyped guy, and stopping him is hard. He's a monster. He has the speed. We saw it against Alabama with that huge run. He could take off, but he's got the physicality. He's a huge body in there. And behind him, even if for some reason he does need a break, he comes out there. Curtis Samuel is a backfield weapon that you can use. He's a little bit similar to Dontre Wilson, but a little bit of a he's played a little bit better. Wilson was a guy that was brought in highly recruited, but hasn't been as great. And even Mike Weber, a true freshman, could factor in the backfield if they do need him to, but the main guy is going to be Ezekiel Elliott. Wide receiver, they do lose Devin Smith to the NFL, but they do return some good players. Michael Thomas, a guy who stepped up late last year as well. He had 799 yards on 54 catches and 9 touchdowns himself, so he is definitely a guy to keep an eye on. As we said, Jalen Marshall was suspended for the first game, but after that he'll come back. He's a huge offensive weapon. Dontre Wilson finally needs to show that he is improving. He's been that guy that's been, he's brought in, as I said, he was highly recruited. Now he needs to show the reason why he was highly recruited. Corey Smith is another guy who has a chance to step up a wide receiver. Johnny Dixon, a redshirt freshman, and Noah Brown also could all factor in. I mean, this wide receiving core, again, last year coming into the year, we didn't know who was going to be great. We knew Devin Smith was going to be good, but we didn't know who would step up. Thomas is the leader this year, and this group is talented. I mean, tight end, you can't even count them out either. Nick Van Eck can make his presence felt, a senior, as well as Marcus Boss. So either one of those guys could step up as well. You're just looking for some receiving threats. Really all they have to do is be able to run good deep routes because that's really their offense. That's what was successful. That's what won them a championship. Run the ball very well, then throw it deep. And if Thomas can prove to be that threat deep, I think they're going to be perfectly fine at that position. Up front, as we said, Michigan State brings back 4 starters. Well, so does Ohio State. They bring back their left tackle, Taylor Decker, who's one of the best in the Big Ten. You bring back your center, Jacoby Boren. He's extremely talented. Pat Eflin at guard comes back. He's one of the better ones in the conference. And Billy Price, he's a sophomore. He's going to be in there at left guard, a returning starter as well. At the right tackle position, they have a senior in Chase Ferris who's been there a while, so he should slide in there. That should be no problem right there. When you look at this offense, it's probably one of the best in the country. I think it is easily the best rushing offense in the country. Of course, the numbers won't show that, but they're the best rush offense in the country that does not run a form of the triple option. I think they have that ability to pass as well, so they're dangerous in both aspects. So that's something to definitely keep an eye on. If they can figure out who their quarterback is and not sit here and go back and forth between Barrett and Jones, their offense is gonna be lethal. And then you work in their defense. As you mentioned, the strength really is up front. Now Bosa is gonna be gone for the first game, but he should return after that, barring something unheard of. He had 13.5 sacks last year. He's the best defensive end in the country right now. The man knows how to play football. He's an extremely successful pass rusher, and I think he's going to be one of those guys that is going to be a monster going into the NFL. Just look at his size. I mean, he's a guy you got to fear, but the problem is you can't really double team him, because then if you double team him, it could open up holes for Adolphus Washington, the big defensive tackle, who played well. He returned for his senior year. It could open up for the defensive end, Taquan Lewis, who has to slide in there and take over a vacant position. And the other defensive tackle position, Tommy Shutt and Joel Hale will battle out for that one. Both of them are extremely talented. At the linebacker position, this is an area where they bring back 2 of their starters, but the guy that is not considered a starter from last year is actually better than his prior. Raquan McMillan, one of the highly recruited players from a year ago, he slides into that middle linebacker position. Smooth transition, guy's an upgrade. He's probably one of the best in the country already. You look at Joshua Perry, great weak outside linebacker, and then you've got the strong side linebacker Darren Lee. He was a sophomore. He played extremely well last year, and he's going to slide in there. He's got another year under his belt. It's going to be amazing just to watch that whole group work together. And, I mean, really behind them, their depth is very solid there as well. In the secondary, return 3 starters as well. Eli Apple, the sophomore corner, returns. He's their top corner. As Jerry Grant has left. That is the only area they have to actually fill in the secondary. That's either going to probably be filled by Garyon Conley or Marshawn Lattimore. The 2 safety positions are locked down with Tavis Powell, one of the best in the country, as well as Von Bell, an extremely talented guy who was recruited highly. He should be right in the race for all Big Ten. Of course, the kicking game is going to be perfectly fine. They have 2 of the better ones in the country. Nuremberger wasn't extremely consistent at times, but he had a solid year last year. When you look at Ohio State, everyone says, okay, they're going 12-0, they're going to be great. I think they will get into the playoff. I think they will be undefeated just because of the way their schedule sets up. I mean, they avoid definitely some hard games. And their hardest game of the year is at Virginia Tech, just because it's there. Michigan State, they get them at home. Minnesota, who I think is going to be really good, who I'll talk about here in my next show, I think they're going to be really good. Penn State, they get them at home. They could be good, but again, it's at home. They are dodging all these bullets. As long as those guys that got in trouble off the field come back and get themselves right, they're going to be perfectly fine. They're the most talented team in the country. They have the hottest coach right now. I mean, the man is 38-3 in 3 years. There is no one else that could do that. Those are like video game type numbers. And we're not talking about Chris Peterson at Boise State. We're talking about Ohio State in the Big Ten. I mean, this team, they've gone undefeated. They went undefeated the year they were sanctioned and couldn't get into a bowl game. And then last year, they went 14-1. They were the team that was not supposed to make the playoff and made the run to win a championship. So I think they're in good hands. Plenty of talent coming back. Ohio State's easily going to win the Big Ten East, I think, because that game that they play against Michigan State, I think they will beat them. And depending on if Michigan State's got their offense together, that could end up being a runaway game. But when I look at it, Ohio State wins the Big Ten East. Michigan State second, Penn State third, Michigan fourth, Maryland fifth, Rutgers sixth, and Indiana seventh. Okay, guys, I'm done with the first show. Big Ten East is in the books. If you want to move over to my next show, I'm going to do the Big Ten West. And then from there, we'll just move on. But thank you for watching this one. And as I said, go and check out my next show. We'll talk about the Big Ten West. And maybe you'll find out who will be playing Ohio State to either get destroyed or possibly maybe even beat them. You never know.